Hi, I'm Bonnie, Log Cabin Stitcher. Welcome to my channel and welcome to my sewing room. I decided to start a video project last month when I became an empty nester, and I happened across a really neat community within YouTube called FlossTube. But I also saw some of the ladies were quilters and they did some videos just about quilting. So I will have a separate theme of videos titled Quilting, and I will have another theme of videos titled FlossTube. And FlossTube was just a very fun community that I learned about, got immersed in, and now I'm back into cross-stitching and re-loving embroidery, but I haven't cross-stitched since the 90s, and now I am all in. That's why I'm doing the FlossTube videos. But it also really inspired me because I miss so much being with my quilt guild. I'm a part of Night Owl Quilters Guild that meets in Rancho Cucamonga, California at the Senior Center. We haven't been meeting since March, and I miss being saturated with the love of quilting, with talking to other friends and quilters, and even going out to dinner afterwards and talking more. So now there is just a greater need for people to get together at a distance, and YouTube is the way that I'm going to do that. So I love very much when I go to my quilt guild to be able to share my quilts, and it's just a way for me to talk about the things that I love. I love doing that. And my mom loved doing that too. So part of why I'm a quilter is because my mom and my sister were quilters in between a time that I did my first quilt when I was 18. So this is a picture of my mom. And this is why I know I love sharing about quilts, because my mom does too. So this is my mom with one quilt at her quilt guild, and this is my mom sharing another quilt. And that was her quilt journal. So she and my sister had a different type of a quilt journal than I do, and I wanted to just share with you real quick about my type of quilt journal. So my quilt journal is really about the different quilts that I do. I will put notes in here, so maybe it's a quilt that I really changed up, why I did it, how I did it, the pattern, the start date, everything. And part of it is just a journal as well. I'm not going to show it to you, but it's just journal, and it's just about different quilting projects, why I started, what was the inspiration, drawing things out so I can remember as I put it away and don't get back to it, how I get back into it. So that is my quilter's journal. Now, what do I want to share with you now? I am going to share about this quilt behind me. And in my first FlossTube video, I was sitting here and because I know a lot of the ladies are intrigued whether or not they quilt. FlossTubers are intrigued with quilts that other ladies have behind them as they're doing their FlossTube videos. So I didn't want to take that time from FlossTube, which is mainly about cross-stitching and embroidery, things that you would do with embroidery floss, and showing the patterns that you got and your project in the ongoing stage, WIPs, works in progress. I wanted to have a separate quilting one with people that really want to know the details of a quilt. So this quilt is called Reel Deal. It's by Joe Morton, and it was in a magazine. I'm sure it was an American Patchwork and Quilting magazine. I can't remember what year, but the neat thing is that even though that pattern may be unavailable, I don't know if it's in one of her other books. It is also in a smaller version in Joe's Little Favorites 3. So I'm going to be sharing one of my unfinished projects from that book. Oh, actually, while I have it in my hand, let's just show you. There is one in this book, and it's called Bedford Reels. And you can see, very similar, but different border than the one that's in mine. And so this one has, in the book, it is a 4-inch finished block. Mine is a 7-inch finished block. So very similar, but that pattern is available as far as that book is available. So the story with this quilt is that I love hand applique, and that's why I love to incorporate both quilting and applique. My mom taught me the needle turn method of applique. Wasn't my thing. I also know that there is machine applique. That's not my thing either, because it really flattens the edges, and that's not what I'm after. I love the freezer paper method of applique, and there is a lot of videos out there that you can learn on YouTube. But I love that because it gives it a pop of dimension. And so as I'm looking at the block behind me, I can see that there is a lot of dimension in that. The salvages go under and it pushes that piece up. And then when I hand quilt around the edge, I love doing, it's a modified big stitch. It's more like an 1/8 of an inch stitch, but I love using my hand dyed, or it's not hand dyed, I don't know, it's Valdani Pearl Cotton size 12 thread. And I love using that as I am doing my modified big stitch, which is more like a medium stitch. It makes me happy. I love old time stuff, and I just love the look of it. I'm a very traditional quilt lover, and I love the dark, the muted colors. They make me feel warm and cozy and safe, and I love those colors. So this was a quilt that I started working on. It was very fun because when it's hot outside, quilting, hand quilting a quilt is hot and sweaty. So what I like doing is having different projects to work on depending on the weather. So this was one that I was able to take with me as my son, I was homeschooling, but at the time my son was taking some hybrid classes, and so I would drive down to that. It was in La Mirada, so that was about 45 minutes from where I live. I would drive down there while he was in his classes. I would go to a park and I would stitch, and I loved it because I love color, I love texture, and I'm addicted to all kinds of things that have to do that with that, and that's why I'm a stitcher, but I'm also a gardener. So when I was working on these applique projects, I would take my stack with me because it would already be pre-done, the pieces of fabric glued down to the backing, and I would have my collection of threads. So at the time I did this, I was using my collection of DMC machine embroidery thread. It's a 50 weight, and I believe it's a 2-ply, and I have a collection. I have a collection of a lot of things, like a lot of you ladies, but that's my collection that I used at the time. Now I have moved on to Aurifil 80 weight because it's even finer, and I love having stitches that you don't see. That was what I worked on at the time, and I started that in 2012. Then when it was time for me to finish it, there is an inner border around a flying geese, and I didn't work off of the pattern. I think the pattern was a different method, and I really, really loved learning how to do. I don't even know if you can see it on here. So you can see it's the Quilt In A Day flying geese ruler. That's the way I learned from my mom, and I love it. And so I really got off in my measurements, and I ended up with a whole lot more flying geese pieces than I needed. And so I will use that in another project. I still have them in a box. But part of the story, I know we all work through stuff as we're quilting. Sometimes we quilt for different reasons. A lot of the reasons that I quilt is so I can process through stuff. I have a lot of crazy in me, and it's just a way that I work through some stuff. I have a lot of energy, and I love doing the hand stitching. So it's why needle and thread to me is wonderful. So as I was doing the border, there was a time in my life that was hard. It was a time in my life when my mom was ill with Alzheimer's, and it was towards the end. It was very hard emotionally. She was in Colorado, and it took her from a woman who loved joy and laughter. She was hilarious. She loved her friends, and it took that joy away. And it was hard as my dad was caring for her at home and all that goes with that. My dad will always be my hero for taking care of her at home until the end when she went to hospice. So during that time, there was a lot of emotions that I had to work through, yet I had to also work. I work as a mobile notary, so I'm driving all over the place and just needing to focus on what I do. So at the time, I chose to go on some medication. And that medication ended up I was on it for about 2 years, ended up with a lot of side effects that were not pretty, and I chose to go off of it eventually. But during that time when I chose to go on it, I had to take a week off of work. And that was when I chose to do the border. And I have done so many of these videos, so I'm not going to mess with the camera to try to show you that border. If I need to, I will insert a picture. But as you're looking around the border, for me, it's right over here. You can see that distinct line for a seam. There was a seam on the border. Now, I know my way around a sewing machine, and I have the other border was so perfect that I actually had to feel for it to find that border. So I decided to go ahead and leave it. I was having so much trouble thinking because of going on this medication. And I wanted to get this quilt done. And I decided to leave it in there as a memorial, as a marker for where I was in my life at that time. And sometimes I regret it because now it's hanging in my sewing room on one of my walls. And I see that seam and I think, dang, I should have just taken it out. But at other times, I am glad I left it in because I never want to go back to that part of my life again. And remembering how I felt and the things that it changed in my life being on that medication. So it's in there. For better or for worse, I am certainly not going to undo it now, and it's there. But it's a quilt that I love, and I love Jo Morton. I love her quilts. I love scrappy quilting. So the other fun thing about this quilt was I decided to kind of get into the Civil War reproduction type of fabrics. And I didn't have a lot. I was really inspired by a friend of mine working on her Civil War quilt, and we were just laughing at how ugly some of these fabrics are, but how intriguing they are too. So they have a certain beauty. And I needed to collect, and so I went to visit my parents and my brother and his family out in Colorado, and there was a lot of lovely quilt stores at the time. So I would go to the quilt stores and I would buy a third of a yard of a whole lot of fabrics. Those poor ladies at the quilt counter, and I told them, I'm sorry, I'm a scrappy quilter and I need to collect. So they were patient, they did, and that's where I got a lot of these fabrics. And what I did is each of the blocks that you will see in this quilt, each one of them is a different fabric. So I collected a lot of small pieces of different fabrics. The problem is when I go to do a border or where I need a larger chunk of fabric, I don't have much of a big chunk of a fabric because I'm a scrappy collector still. And what I wanted to show you with this quilt, this is a wall hanging. It's Plaid Pumpkins by Cheri Payne. And it was pretty true to the pattern. I just added a few more stars and I changed the shape of the stars. But this is what I love about my style of needlework is the freezer paper turn or the needle paper turn. It would do the same thing. It gives it a bit of a raised dimension on the edge. And then as I'm doing my big stitch, you can see they're more like 1/8 of an inch of a stitch. And I love using my Valdani pearl cotton. I believe it's size 12 that I use. But it's fun. This is my style. And I love these. To me, this is, I just love looking at the dimension. To me, it's what I guess they would call eye candy, where I can sit with a quilt. I can sit with just about anything in a cup of coffee and really enjoy looking at it if it has that beauty of the color and the texture. But that's my style of quilting. So the other reason that I wanted to do these videos is because when I share these quilts and I do my show and tell, it's very different from some other quilters in the sense that most people don't do as much hand applique as I do, and the big stitching around it gives it a certain look, more of a folk art primitive look. And so I always have ladies coming up afterwards and they want to look at it, and I tell them, touch it, it's so fun when you touch that texture. It calls out for that, and that's what gives me great pleasure to do. So another project that I wanted to share with you was my very first quilting project, and it is a story also about my mother's quilting project, because this is a mom and me quilt project that we did. So this is the double Irish chain. It's going to be harder to show a quilt in this format. So this is a double Irish chain, very old fabrics. So this is one that I did in 1982 before I got married, and I had learned to sew at 16, loved sewing. And so I thought, I want to make a quilt for my bed. We got married in 1983 and I wanted to have a handmade quilt. It never got done at that time because I took the class. I made the quilt. I had a great time, and my mom helped me choose the fabrics, and it was fun. I loved working with my mom on doing different things. So she helped me choose the fabrics. We got it, I made it, and then it sat. And it sat. And it sat till about 1995, when my mom learned to quilt and ended up moving to Colorado, being in quilt guilds, loving to share about her quilts. And so I gave it to her. I said, you can have this. It is sat. I'm not going to do anything with it. Go for it. You can have it and you can keep it. Do whatever you want with it. So what she did with it was so fun. So she loved to hand quilt, but she and my sister do amazing needle and thread handwork, whereas I use the big stitch and the pearl cotton. So I had marked all these. So this is the block where she did the hand quilting of that beautiful, I think it's a feathered heart. Now, the amazing thing was that I had marked it out in 1982 with a clover pen just like this. This is a water erasable blue marking pen, and as quilters, I use this a lot. And I have found, and this is the thing, when I gave it to my mom, I said, I have now heard that those marking pens don't always come out. So you may have a ruined quilt there because of the blue may always be on there. So she tested it, and she tested an area because it was already marked out. She didn't want to remark it all. She tested an area, and that blue marker actually came off, which is amazing because we don't have central air in our house, and it had been hot. So that was amazing that she did the hand quilting on it. The other amazing thing about it is that she did this as a surprise. So she didn't tell me what she was doing. She just said that she was working on it. But she did some really fun things with it. So in the corner, she embroidered 1982. That was the year that I worked on it. Let's see if I can find the other part. This is the years that she worked on it, 2000, 2001. So that's what she did. She didn't tell me what she did in the border, and that is so cool because she asked me for my handprint. And so I traced out my hand and I mailed it to her. Then she asked me, she sent me little snippets of fabrics that I had given her when I was done. You know, I just gave her a ton of fabrics that I had collected in the 80s when I was working at that fabric store. And then I made a lot of clothes. I made my own clothes with those fabrics. And so she said, which is your favorites? And so I can still remember the sundress. Oh, that's my mom's. I can still remember the sundress I made out of this fabric, and this is what she did with mine. So it was my handprint, and she embroidered Bonnie on there. That was my favorite fabric. And then she did hers with her favorite choice of a fabric. She always loved little tiny pink flowers, and she embroidered her handprint. But also what she did is she hand quilted, but she would take the leaves in her yard. She and my dad lived in Montrose, Colorado at that time, and they had a large property, a lot of cottonwood trees. So she took the leaves in her yard and around her neighborhood. She made applique pieces, and so she did her needle turn applique. She hand quilted it, and so that is a treasure that I have from that. But the other fun thing about this quilt is something that she surprised my dad with and something that I surprised her friends with. So she, living in Montrose, Colorado, was part of different quilt guilds, and then there was a local quilt show, Black Canyon Quilt Show. Now it's quite a big show, but she would put her quilts in that as a local artisan. And I went to visit her one time when she had quilts up there, and my sister had quilts up in there. And I got to go visit in a back room with some of her friends back there. And so they were just getting to know me, and they were laughing. My mom and laughter, they just went hand in hand. So she was talking with her friends, introducing them to me, and I was just listening to them chat. And then one of them asked me, do you quilt? And I said, oh my gosh, no, I haven't quilted since I was a virgin. And of course that got a lot of laughter, and they remembered that. The ladies would talk about it with her afterwards. So that was something that they remembered, and it was funny. That's why I said it. So lo and behold, she works on this quilt. She hangs it in the quilt show. another year of Black Canyon, and then of course my dad goes with her to see the quilt, and she had not told him that she named it the Virgin Quilt. So of course this quilt is hanging, and then there's a big piece of paper with the name of the quilt and talks about the artist and about why that quilt was named. And so she just walks up with my dad, look at this is my quilt, and he looks at it and he sees the Virgin Quilt. He's like, what the heck did you name it that for? So it was so funny that they did it. So she just said, well, aren't you proud that my daughter was a virgin when she got married? And so then it was just the story. So on the back of this quilt, it kind of has that story on there. But it is such a fun memory for me to have. My mom developed Alzheimer's, and she had it for several years. And during that time, she lost a lot of that joy, and it was a very hard time. So during that time, when she knew she was getting it, and she knew it was coming on, it was the early stages, I went out, and she would always have a hand quilt, or she would always have a handmade quilt of hers on the bed where my husband and I slept. So she had this one out, and I remember the day that she told me, it's time for it to come to live at your house. And I knew why. I knew because she knew she wanted me to enjoy it while she could think about me having it. So again, there's always tears involved with someone you love, but there's laughter too. And so I am choosing joy. That's part of me. That's part of my natural health. That's one of the things that I do. There's a verse in the Bible about joy nevertheless. And so that was something that I really shared with my mom. We would talk about it. Joy nevertheless. Joy nevertheless. So that's part of what I do and why I stitch and why I love laughter. And when I'm really missing my mom, I will remember that, and I remember it was a day that I was in my sewing room here, and I was just thinking, I can't cry. I can't grieve anymore. I gotta live and I gotta enjoy life. And I really thought, man, who my mom was with all her laughter and her joy and her silliness and her love of stitching and her love of friends, I'm gonna need some Kleenex soon, is part of who I am. So a lot of what I miss about my mom is part of who I am. And I thought, I am who I am because of my mom as well, and my dad, and just life experiences. So that really helped me to move forward, to move on, and to choose joy and to have joy nevertheless. So that's part of, I know, why a lot of us quilt and stitch, because of emotions and just because of wanting to choose joy along the way. So what else do I want to share with you? Let's see. I shared with you that there is a smaller version of this quilt in here, but I would also like to share with you one of my, now in the quilters world, we call unfinished projects UFOs, unfinished objects. Now in the cross-stitching world, and what I've learned in FlossTube, they call their projects works in progress. To me, that sounds a lot more positive, and I like that. Unfinished object sounds kind of negative. And a whip, not only does it sound kinky, but it sounds more positive because it's a work in progress. So I am going to show you my work in progress from this book, another Joe Morton. I have a whole lot of works in progress, or UFOs. This is the project that I'm working on, Basket Parade. And I have a lot of it done, but it's not completed because I probably have about 20 UFOs. I adore this book. This is Joe Morton, and I would love to meet her someday. But I adore just looking through, like this. Just the pictures in this book give me great joy. That's where, even though I don't get magazines now, I treat these like magazines. And I have a cup of coffee. I have my room with tons of magazines, and it gives me great joy. So let me show you my quilt in progress. These are my blocks. So again, scrappy. So every single one of these, I think there was 32. I'll just show you a couple of them. 32 of these hand applique baskets, the same way that I do these, are all different fabrics. Let me see. There we go. So I'm going to show you some of the different ones. The background was a charm pack, and I just wanted lots of different colors. There we go. They're dropping. But they're a lot of my fun and funky. That's Kim Deal. There's a lot of scraps, but they tend to sort of be about this kind of look. So browns and blacks and reds. Another part of the project is that center, so I have the centerpiece done. What I need to do now is the flying geese around the edge, and again, I love flying geese, so that will be fun to work on. This is part of the freezer paper method of applique. I have the freezer paper pieces. These will be, kind of like for this one, these will be the blocks in between, and then I have some lovely dark fabric that I will use, but I don't want to pull it out. What I'm going to do now, I'm really inspired to get that quilt done, so I need to just do a little bit of work and then it will be put together and no more unfinished projects. So that's one of my works in progress. Now the other thing is I love Blackbird designs. Now since I've gotten into cross stitching, I am loving their cross stitch patterns, but I have many of their quilt books. So this is a project that I have called Birds of a Feather, and I started this in my quilt journal. I looked. Did I write it down? Can I see that? I don't know. I can't even read when I started it. Oh, 2008. So it is time for me to finish it. But it's quite a big project. And it's really neat because, is it Barbara Allen and Alma Adams? I can't remember. Two ladies. I can't even think right now what their names are, but that's okay. They do two different styles of quilts in theirs because each one of them, I could read it if I had my glasses. Alma Allen and Barb Adams. I love, because I do kind of a combination between the two, and then I love looking at the blocks and enjoying them. But one thing I also like doing is really changing things up. So the reason that this is still unfinished is because I took this project and turned it into brain surgery and made it too complicated, and that's why it's still sitting in the box. So I decided, let's simplify and let's get it done and let's stop messing around. So I'm going to show you some of these blocks, and they're not ironed. I was not going to take the time to iron them, but this was my very first applique block. So this one, and I ended up getting it wet, and it did some things to it with the stitching that I decided I wasn't going to do again. I actually had put the water-soluble interfacing behind it because I thought I needed something for stability. And then I showed my sister and she said, you don't need anything behind it. You just need to applique it. So there you go. I should have asked you first, Ginger. But this is one of my blocks. And this is very traditional look for Barbara Adams and Alma Allen of the Blackbird designs. So that is one block. This is another one. And when I first started this, I was trying to make each bird represent a real bird because my dad was in the Audubon Society, the Sierra Club, and as kids, we learned how to bird watch. I had a bird life list. I love bird watching. I don't worry about identifying anymore. I just like to sit back and drink my coffee and enjoy them. But I wanted to make them represent birds. So this is a mockingbird. I would look at a mockingbird and I would see the coloration. I would look at my fabric. And see, I turned it into brain surgery, and it's pretty, but it's like, why are those wings white? But anyway, I'm not going to redo it. They're there. That's my mockingbird. Then, of course, this is a mourning dove. So I was looking at the soft colors of fabrics that I had for a mourning dove. So that soft brown like a mourning dove. And so this one has 4 pieces. And I worked hard to make those all look like mourning doves, not just because of the shape, but because of the fabric I chose. There are no mourning doves that dark. I guess I was going rogue at that time, or that. Maybe that was when I decided, let's do this different, girl. Then another one, I have a piece that I tore out, and I haven't done its legs yet, but one of the flowers I didn't like, so I tore that out. So that is another box. But see, they're beautiful, and I need to just finish it because right now they're in a box. This one, we have flycatchers in our front yard. So this was the color of that flycatcher. And I had a little trouble. Again, this was the beginning of my hand applique, and there are some places, yeah, I can see this one. Didn't meet up so well, but it's like, darn, it's done. It's good enough. And I love this fun, funky Civil War fabric. So again, I love it. Need to finish it. Of all the fabrics that I have, this is one of my favorite. I love it. So, and my sister loves sharing scraps with me. This is Ginger. This is one of yours. Love that fabric. Okay, so here's another one. This looks like I got this one wet too. Don't know why I did that, but I did. But again, oh, look at, I finished that. It actually has legs. That's good. But that was, I think, the second one I did, because I remember I had trouble with those little leaves forever ago. Love this fabric, the color choices, and I think I got that from my mom or my sister. Now here's another one where I was trying to match a bird, and of course I love robins, so I took this bird and turned it into a robin, and now I'm thinking, do I like it or not? Doesn't matter, it's on there, it's not coming off. But I love that urn. I don't always like all the urns on the patterns, but let's see, to show you without all the threads. Isn't that amazing? I will be learning. Okay, guys, I will be learning. I know you guys are patient. Isn't that amazing? I love that urn. It just makes me happy looking at. And I love some of the funky fabrics as well. So that's my robin. This is a legless bird. Legolas. But again, I had some trouble on the corners. This is where I had trouble with the beginning of applique. But I've done a lot of applique since then, so let's just get it done, girl. That's what I'm thinking. Now, this is where I started a project. Oh, look at, I got some birds actually finished. Birds and leaves in there. What are they doing in there? I got no idea, because it was a long time ago. These are some beautiful fabrics. Look at this. I've chosen the fabrics. I've cut out the shapes. This is for a block that is pairs. So look at that beautiful pair. Look at, this is the back. This is how the process of how I do it. That's the front. Doesn't that look gorgeous for a pair? I like trying to choose the fabrics that would really represent it. But again, I can get way too complicated. Here's my little bird. This will be a little wren. So again, I just need to get it done, because a lot of my UFOs are in boxes in my cupboard here, and those fabrics are kind of out of the parade of fabrics that I would choose from my considerable stash now. But a lot of these fabrics I got from my mom and my sister, and I really wanted to keep them together. This is William Morris fabric, and I got these scraps from Mom, who shared them with my sister. And I love them, and I want to put them in blocks. But again, I don't want them just sitting in this box doing nothing. So I'm going to get a move on. I'm going to get inspired, and I am going to get some of these projects done. So what else do I want to share with you? Boom, 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 boom. Oh, I guess I also, since I have these here, my progression of my choice of threads for my hand applique. I love doing the blind stitch, and I really love having it where you do not see those stitches. And I started out with the Gutermann 50 weight cotton thread, and I collected quite a few of them, and this is what I used, but the stitches showed, and I think that's what I did on that very first Blackbird that I did. Then I moved on, like I mentioned, to this DMC machine quilting. It's a 50 weight, but it's a 2-ply. I have no idea if this is a 2-ply or a 3-ply. Now, this year, I was introduced to, isn't this gorgeous? The Aurifil 80 weight is on these cherry wood spools. So for a girl that likes tradition and likes old things and likes to collect and likes color, I have a collection of these now. So this is the Aurifil 80 weight. Higher number, thinner, the smaller the object is. So thinner thread. This is amazing. It's like butter. It's like stitching with butter. That would be a mess of a quilt. But these are great, and there's different places that I have been able to find them. I bought a couple collections. I will do a video just about the different threads that I use and why I use them. And because I love having organization and having them in a place that I can just enjoy them, I wanted to share my organization with you. So I will do a video about how I keep my embroidery floss, both my DMC and my overdyed, different than I've seen people use, and just a little bit about why I chose the Aurifil 80 weight, and also I machine quilt with the 50 weight Aurifil. So anyway, that's just a little bit about me. I'm going to try to keep these videos at 30 minutes, so I will try to choose projects to share with you, and share with you a little bit about, you know, like this one with the hand applique and how I do that and how I do the big stitch, or that I do the big stitch. I'm not going to show how I do it right now, but I just want to share different quilts with you. I have quite a few, and I love talking about them, and I love hearing other ladies talk about theirs. So hopefully there is a place for these videos within YouTube, and I know I have a few quilting friends that at least will watch those. So if you've made it through the end and you like it, I would love for you to subscribe. I would love for you to do a thumbs up. And I'm planning on doing these videos about once a week. We'll see how that works. I work a very unsteady schedule because I work on call as a mobile notary certified signing agent. So my schedule is crazy. I will be taking texts while I'm doing these videos. That's just how it works unless I do it late at night. So I'm going to try to put these up with some sort of regularity. I am so enjoying floss tube and learning about cross stitch again. And so again, if you're intrigued in that, I'm going to try to put both these videos up the same day. So I have a floss tube #1 and I have a quilting #1, and that's what this is. So thanks for listening. And I feel like I'm going to have this community of people visiting me in my sewing room, which right now, that's what we all need. We just need a community regarding positive things. So I'd love to challenge you. Choose joy. You probably already do, but choose joy nevertheless. And God bless you. And thank you so much for watching. If you would want to comment and maybe share about your favorite style of quilting, your favorite designer, your favorite line of fabrics, I would love to get to know you more. Thank you guys. Goodbye.